person ain't no big deal. Just put the gun to their head.
So here we are at the Survival Horror Corner. By popular demand, too people, I'll be covering Clock Tower. I know everyone already has their take on the series.
Here, we are not talking about the game originally released as Clock Tower for the Japanese Super Famicom.
Clock Tower? That's not very scary. Oh God!
So I have to say that this is probably one of the most ominous title screens I've ever seen in a Super Nintendo game.
Regardless, I'll throw my opinion on it too. To preface my experience with the series, it's literally nothing besides watching other people talk about it. I mean, I've always known about the series since I was a kid. I'd always seen it in the video store and I was so attracted to the cover art. But that was the PS1 version. The one I'm going over is the one never officially released in America. So this game was released September 14th, 1995 for the SNES, and lesser known, in 97 for the PC and PS1, and in 99 for the WonderSwan, 2010 for the Wii, 2011 for the PSN, and from what I've read, the Wii U as well. All of which is only available in Japan. That's fucking shit. The only way to get this game on the SNES is either emulation or a reproduction cart. The reproduction carts run about $65 complete in box. Despite it never being officially released in the States, it's now getting some of the recognition it deserves. For a game that came out in '95, for the Super Nintendo, it's a really ambitious title that nails the atmosphere and story. Despite its age, it still holds up well. So starting with how the game controls, it's a point-and-click game which is pretty self-explanatory in terms of control. It works fine enough. My biggest problem is the walk speed. Jennifer moves so slow. Some of these animations have so much bloat going on, it's ridiculous. Sometimes she'll walk to something you clicked on to examine it, walk back, and you'll need to go back to it. Oh God! I can't help to feel as if this is to pad the game a bit since it is relatively short. Regardless, the game functions as it should. While it does look like a 16-bit game, it still stands strong as an atmospheric horror game. It starts off giving you some story. You and 3 other girls are being brought to this creepy mansion to be adopted by some guy named Mr. Barrows. Once you arrive, Miss Mary just disappears. Lights go out and your friends disappear as well. So right away, you're alone in the middle of a mansion with no direction on what to do or where to go. This really reminds me of Resident Evil. Well, I guess Resident Evil really reminds me of this. This game is really awesome in the fact of how open-ended the game is. Right from the start, you're not given any direction and you're left to explore this daunting mansion. The game also wastes no time when it comes to introducing one of the main villains. Literally, 3 minutes in, you encounter the ever so popular Scissor Man, Bobby. He has murdered one of your friends, depending on which route you take, and is now after your butt. Here's where I draw one of my biggest criticisms. The hiding is such a mess. Unless I fucking suck balls, which is totally possible, most of the rooms don't have an option to hide. There are only a few rooms you can hide in. The rest are highly specific actions you perform to thwart Bobby, which makes the encounters with Bobby tedious. When your main antagonist becomes more of a nuisance than a threat, it kinda kills some of the fear. Most of the hiding spots are really sparse and cryptic. Out of all the rooms there are, only a few of them harbor a place to hide. The rest of the things you can do are just objects you use to thwart them. The only other thing that drives me nuts is the stamina system. Not the actual concept itself, but how it's handled. Sprinting, encounters with Bobby, shock moments, all take away from your adrenaline. Adrenaline dictates whether you'll survive your next close call. This is actually fun and really awesome, but why am I punished for running? The game expects you to either 1. Walk everywhere, Or 2, pop a squat and sit there to recover. And sit there, and sit there, and sit there, and sit. Good God! So overall, the gameplay is fine for what it is, if not a bit cryptic and slow. I know this review is going to be peppered with, for the SNES it's, but honestly you have to take in consideration when the game came out and what the technology could do. For the SNES, the graphics are really well done. All the rooms look very detailed. All the animations are good and fluid. The close-up stills look awesome. Something about them is really unsettling. Mixed with the low resolution, it really adds to that primal fear of the unknown. Really, the visuals establish quite the atmosphere. I'm genuinely shocked how well done it is. All the character sprites are pretty good. Something about Miss Mary looks off. The face close-ups at the bottom really help with the realism. Seeing Jennifer actually react to what is happening to her really adds weight to it all. The game has a really good atmosphere, like, really good. The sounds are quite immersive for the SNES. The soundtrack is a bit limited, but the songs that are there are really good. Like the ones found in the ritual room are really ominous. The soundtrack is used very sparsely. I feel it really adds tension when each room is filled with silence. The only thing that accompanies you is your footsteps. One detail I really appreciate is the panning effects. It's really cool to hear Scissorman behind you just snipping away. Speaking of that cheeky son of a bitch, let's talk about the enemies. So the elephant in the room is Scissorman, or Bobby Barrows. I know it's been said before,
But then again, that did look like a bit like Angus Young. But then again,
he really does look like Angus Young. On the plus side, giant shears are a pretty intimidating weapon. When I initially saw him, I was just so perplexed at why they'd make him so little. But that's before I learned he's actually a 9-year-old boy, which kinda seems silly at first, but really factors into the plot much later. They actually put a lot of thought into hinting at it right away. Like if Scissorman catches you, he jumps up and down in excitement, something a kid would do. Just like a lot of things he does is just really childish, like this. I might be reading too much into it, but it really seems to be really well thought out. So, at face value, he might not look too intimidating, but his overall arc is much more sinister. Dan is just a gross purple monster. The sounds you hear him making throughout the house, though, are really unsettling. The rest of the threats are just haunted mirrors, haunted dolls, hungry dudes, and an asshole bird. Birds love him. The real main antagonist, though, is Miss Mary. This lunatic adopts 4 young girls, using her position as a teacher to sacrifice them or feed them to this guy. She locks her husband up to suffer for him trying to stop her. Everything she says and does is just the most fastidious and evil. Like there's a scene where she's like, drink this, oh shit son, she did it, and throws you in with Simon. She calls you a thief for taking away Dan and tells you you've been a terrible daughter. Not only is she evil, she's also insane. So all this leads to the story. The story is told in a really awesome way. Like Resident Evil and Amnesia, you learn a lot through books, images, and notes. And this came back out in '95, like a year before Resident Evil, which kind of popularized the whole like story through notes thing. The story is quite interesting, but it is hard to get all the details in a single playthrough, and even then, I still don't think I have a full grasp of it as of yet. So from the start, it shows Miss Mary taking the 4 girls to meet with Mr. Barrows in this totally not suspicious mansion. Right when you get there, Miss Mary fucks off and vanishes. After all hell breaks loose, you're left to explore the mansion and discover how awful your situation is. This is where it can get a bit tricky trying to explain it, since the game is really open-ended, but you learn that Miss Mary is this evil woman that marries Simon Barrows. We learn somewhat that the Barrows family has a strange curse and religion. If a Barrows decides not to practice their religion, they have a curse placed upon them. So after being affected by said curse, Miss Mary births 2 deformed demons. Mr. Barrows tries to stop Mary, but fails and she decides to keep him in prison. Jennifer's father is later discovered to have been involved with this. You find his skeleton in a secret room with a memo saying how he delivered the demons. They ate his hand and kept him trapped in the room for 3 days until his death. Now this game has a lot of endings all the way from S to H. 2 of the endings can be achieved in about 5 minutes. Jennifer gets in the car and leaves. She ends up dying in both H and G. Endings E, F, and D, Jennifer ends up dying in a multitude of ways. D is especially rough since Jennifer runs over to Mary, not knowing she's evil. She, of course, being evil, stabs Jennifer and Jennifer asks why. Endings S through C have you live, sometimes with one of the other kids. You end up killing Dan, Bobby, and Miss Mary. Who's the real killer here? Maybe Jennifer's the delusional killer, and we're seeing it through her eyes. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. The story is quite dark. It draws inspiration from the film Creepers. I am a total sucker anything occult related since I find it just so fascinating, and here it's no different. I really like the story, and again for the SNES, this is ridiculously impressive to have this level of storytelling in a game. It's a bit hard to follow since it is so open-ended and some things are left unanswered. Why Bobby hates the bell tower sounds, I don't know. The religion and curse thing are a bit vague. Overall, I'm quite impressed with the story. Now one thing that's really looked over is that there are indeed multiple versions of this game, so let's get to it. So the PC and PS1 ports are very similar. Now getting a hold of any form of the PC version is fucking impossible, so I can only speak for the PS1 version. The PS1 version is a lot better and has a fan translation too. The graphics are improved and the sound quality is obviously much better. It helps even more so with the immersion. Somehow the music has been fucked up. Yuck. There are more close-ups in a new room. Now the dead thing you find in the locker actually gets up and dances at you. Other than a few changes, it's overall a better version, but also is a bit hard to obtain. The version for the WonderSwan is pretty much the same in terms of content, but it's in black and white and less detailed. Honestly, this just blows my mind how ambitious this game was. For a game that came out in 1995, for the Super Nintendo, and is this atmospheric, and tells its story in such a way, is fucking nuts! Like, other games may have done it before, but not this well. So overall, this game is highly recommended. It's a relatively short adventure, but with this many endings, and so many subtle differences each time through, you kinda have to play it a couple times to figure it all out. So until next time, hopefully you ain't afraid no ghosts.